It's all in your imagination. There's not going to be anything out there in the darkness staring back at you. Or is there? Our guest tonight is Wade Parker. When Wade was 13, he had a terrifying encounter with a dog man. He's here tonight to share the details of that encounter with you. I guarantee it's an encounter you're not going to forget. And I also guarantee that you're not going to forget to shut those drapes after you hear this one. Wade, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Vic. It's good to be here.
Let's jump right into it. You've got a really good encounter to share tonight with the listeners. Before we get into that, could you give the listeners a brief bio on yourself?
My name is Wade. I'm 51 years old. I live here in Chandler, Texas. Originally, I'm from southern Illinois, the very extreme southern tip, right across the river from Paducah, Kentucky, which is about as south in Illinois as you can go. I guess I've lived here in Texas about 25 years now. My encounter that I'm about to tell you about happened in southern Illinois in approximately 1976, I believe.
When this encounter happened, Wade, I realize you were only 13, but
Correct.
Before that, did you believe in Bigfoot and things like that?
I was certainly open to the possibility of, say, Bigfoot. Back then, there was not the information available that there is now, obviously. I do distinctly remember reading a book. I want to say his name was Peter Byrne. And the book fascinated me. So I sought that out in the school library. But that was the extent of really my Bigfoot knowledge. But I never really believed in it technically. I was just hoping he did exist, just open to the possibility.
Before we listen to the details of your encounter, your family, did they have any opinions on the whole Bigfoot thing? Did they shun the idea of it being a possibility? Because we're talking about a time that was not long after the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Well, you know, that's true, time-wise. To be honest with you, I really don't know that my parents ever thought about Bigfoot. It was not something we really talked about. I had great parents. They were open-minded on almost everything. Had I sat down at the kitchen table one night and said, Dad, is there such a thing as Bigfoot? I feel confident that he probably would have said, Wade, I don't know, but we don't know everything that's out there. There's a chance. And as far as if I'd have said, Dad, I believe in Bigfoot, he would not have shunned the idea in any way. He would have just said, well, you're welcome to that thought. But it's not something that really came up, so I'm having to speculate on what might have been said or thought.
Since that encounter happened to you so early in your life, let's go ahead and jump into the details of that encounter early in the show here. Please give us all the details that come to mind about your encounter. I'm really looking forward to this.
All right, Vic. I was 13 years old. We lived just outside the small town of Metropolis, Illinois. Metropolis had about 7,000 people in it. I lived approximately 4 miles from town. We were out in a rural area. Most everybody that lived out by us all had a little bit of acreage. I think we had close to 30 acres. Everybody had at least 5 acres, I think, something like that. We had some woods on our property. My best friend at the time his name was Brian. He lived down about a 3-minute bike ride down the road from me. So we hung out all the time, and one night he and I decided that I'd spend the night at his house. He lived in a split-level home, which was fairly popular back then, which means it was built semi into a hillside. It had a basement that you could drive into, raise the garage doors. The basement was partially furnished. He and I were playing in the basement. And I'm guessing approximately 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Had a couple lights on. And on the basement wall was the window which went outside. The window was, when I'm looking back on it now, I'm guessing maybe 6 feet up high on the basement wall, which would have put it at ground level outside. The window was maybe 14, 16 inches tall and a couple feet wide. So anyways, he and I were just goofing around, and I remember at one point I just saw a movement of something in the window which really caught my eye. I turned and looked at it, and I said, "Hey, Brian, you see that?" And he saw where I was looking, and he goes, "Yes." What I saw seemed to basically fill up the window, and it was the outline of the head was canine to me. It definitely had a snout, relatively long. The head in general was bigger than the average dog. It had ears in an upright position. They were pointed. And as far as the eyes, I don't recall any glowing eyes or anything like that. Looking back on it now, I remember seeing the eyes. I saw teeth, but the mouth was not open. And it was just staring at us. And I knew that that was not supposed to be there. So I would say we stared at it for 8, 10 seconds, something like that. And it tilted its head maybe 30 degrees. And then a couple seconds after it tilted its head, it started beating the window. And when it was beating on the window, it wasn't like it was trying to punch through the glass. It was more of hitting it up high and bringing the hands down. It was definitely hands. It was not a paw or anything like that. It was something that could grasp an object. And I can distinctly remember the clicking of the claws as they hit the glass. And it did it very fast. It was almost a blur. And pretty much at that point, he and I both started hollering, and we turned to the stairs, which went up into the house, and we were probably up the stairs in about 4 or 5 seconds into the living room. And his mother and father were sitting on the couch watching TV, and his dad kind of started hollering at us because we were making so much noise. We finally got to listen and told him that there was some kind of monster outside. So he said, "Well, let's go take a look." So we all went out the back door, and by this time, probably a minute and a half at least had passed. And we went out into the backyard and around the side of the house, and of course there was nothing there. No, we didn't even have a flashlight to look for tracks or anything like that. Plus, whether he believed us or not, I'm not sure. The only other thing of pertinence is, near the house they had a large dog pen where 2 Irish setters were. What really struck me is these dogs barked nonstop at everything. The dogs were in the house, their house, and they were not barking, and they did not want to come out of their house. Even his dad realized that the dogs were scared of something. What did I see? Back then, I did not know. It didn't have a name. What I saw wasn't supposed to exist. Your mind works quick. When something happens to you, you can go through 1,000 thoughts in 5 seconds. And I just could not put an animal to what I saw. It looked like a big werewolf, for example. Whenever I've described the story to friends over all these years, back then the werewolves in movies and such really didn't look like what I saw. As I'm talking to you now, I remember I used to get some of the horror magazines and such, and some of the werewolves in those, drawn by artists, looked like that. But now, the Underworld movie series that's out, those werewolves look exactly like what I saw. Like I've said before, in today's times, you can tell somebody that you saw Bigfoot. They may laugh at you, but there's a possibility that they'll not laugh at you. Most people seem to be kind of accepting of the fact, well, maybe there's a chance. But how do you tell somebody that you saw a werewolf? And I'm pretty confident that's what I saw. I just had no name for it until recently, last few months, I started searching the internet, and I ran across the term dog man. Shortly after that, I discovered you and started really just poring over everything, trying to gain as much knowledge as I could. So I'm 100% sure what I saw back in 1976 that night was a dog man. That's pretty much the story.
You know what, Wade? That is a source of such frustration for me, the fact that you've got so many people out there that have been through what you went through with Brian that night. And they just feel so lost because they just don't have anyone to go to.
Exactly right.
That's right. You made the point that a Bigfoot eyewitness, they might get laughed at, but they're much more likely to be taken seriously than someone that comes forward to try to tell someone about seeing what looked like a werewolf. So
right.
I'm so glad you did find me so that we could talk about this. To back up a little bit and talk about what you saw that night, if it was crouched down like that, looking in at you two, did you ever get an idea how it could support its torso and its head off the ground and scratch at the window with its hands like that?
Well, honestly, no. Over the years, when I think about the incident off and on, I've wondered that. How could I do it even? You know, looking down, you're going to be on all fours. At best, your elbows will be on the ground as well. But then you won't have the ability to just go after that window the way that creature did. I'm just not sure. Obviously, he's built a little bit different and has different strengths than what I do because he got the job done. I couldn't imagine what kind of position he was in or how he could have done it. That's a very interesting point.
Well,
I don't have an answer for that.
As a human, we could kneel down on our knees and position ourselves like that to claw at a window, supporting our torso, our head, all of that. Depending on how it was built, I guess it could too. That had to be one heck of a sight. Wow. To talk about the after effects, did you spend the night there at Brian's house, or did you wind up just going home, having his dad take you home?
I sure wouldn't have hopped back on the bike I got there on. No, I did finish the night out there. I remember sitting up until the wee hours of the morning, Brian and I talking about it. We never had a good answer. You know, and honestly, at the time, we wondered, could it have been his dad pranking us? Some type of wild, for example, Halloween mask that was extremely good quality. The more we questioned that idea, the only answer that we ultimately kept coming back to was the fact that we were up those stairs in seconds when that thing was at the window. And when we opened that door, his mom and dad were right there on the couch in the living room looking at us. So it wasn't his folks out there. I never really came up with an answer. I can assure you, had it been a human being walking into the yard, the dogs in the dog pen would have set up such a noise. That's another clue that tells me that it was some type of creature, the dog man, because the dogs in the dog pen, they were scared. They were not making a sound at all.
That's a really good point. Very good deductive reasoning right there. The dogs, like you said, they were shook up about something. They wouldn't act that way if it would have been Brian's dad that had crept around into the backyard. So it sure sounds to me like something was going on. I really think you did see a dog man that night. An interesting tidbit I'm going to share with you, the cryptids that are running around out there that I refer to as being canine-type dogmen. For some reason, they seem to have a fascination with dogs. Before that dogman clawed at your window there, I'd bet you really good money it paid a little visit back to those Irish setters in the pen. That's what shook them up, and when they went into their houses, that's when he came knocking at that window, unfortunately.
It sounds logical. That's probably exactly what happened. That's the first thing he's obviously going to check out everything there, or he wouldn't have been at the house in the first place. So yeah, he would go right up to the Irish setters.
Your encounter is the only encounter involving a dog that I have spoken to eyewitnesses about that I can openly share. But all I'm going to say is what I was telling you about dogs and what you were just describing about what happened. it comes together the way I would expect it to. Moving on, Wade, after you spent that sleepless night, you say you were awake until the wee hours of the morning. After you wound up getting home, were your parents there? And if they were, I'm sure that was instantly out. That was the first thing you did, was tell them about what you had been through and what you had seen.
You're exactly right. I can remember trying to tell Mom and Dad about that, and they listened respectfully. Did they believe me? I don't know. I was not prone to telling stories. I was pretty much honest all my life. I didn't cry wolf, so I would like to think they believed me. But like I said, they respectfully listened. But I talked about it probably for up to a week until it finally tapered off. I can assure you, anytime I walked outside in the evenings, I was looking over my shoulder, and I didn't linger out there very long, even if my folks were with me.
I'm so glad to hear that you got such a positive response when you did make it home and share that story with them. It is so frustrating to hear about eyewitnesses going home to their loved ones, to their family, sharing the details of their encounter only to be laughed at.
They didn't poo-poo it at all. They were all about being respectful to me and listening.
That's really good to hear then. It's easy to assume that a dogman encounter might last 15 seconds. An encounter might last a minute or two. The truth of the matter is, dogman encounters tend to last a lifetime. It's not something that is like flipping a switch on and flipping it off. You carry that around with you for the rest of your days. How well or how poorly you deal with it, that's obviously got a lot to do with the character of the person. How well they can handle what they've been through, the type of people that they're exposed to after the encounter that either help them get over it, as much as possible that is, or unfortunately in some cases, how many people they're exposed to that laugh at them and do nothing but make things worse. Having said all that, could you share with us how that encounter has affected you moving forward in your life after the age of 13?
Well, that's interesting. I've always had these little issues going through the years. I did not necessarily attribute to that encounter directly until I started finding out more about what it was. And once I did that, I looked back and I'm going, oh my gosh, oh, that's why I'm that way, or that's why I did this a certain way, or whatever. I can assure you, there's not much that I let bother me or scare me. I'm not scared of much of anything. But throughout the rest of my childhood, up to this day, the nighttime darkness does make me a little uneasy. It's like I spoke before, I don't get any comfort taking the garbage to the end of the driveway at night, for example. That's probably a common example, but it's true. It's something that each one of us pretty much does. And the whole time I'm doing it, I'm listening for any sound or just looking all around while I'm walking. I've always been uneasy in the woods, daytime or night. But I was never really sure. I didn't really attribute that encounter necessarily to doing that to me. But once I started learning more about what I saw, that's when I realized that actually that's what it was, because I knew what was out there. It's very unsettling. And honestly, talking to you right now, even at this moment, I know that this creature, or creatures, I guess I should say, plural, exist. I saw it. I know it's out there. Still, logically, it's a little hard to accept. It's not supposed to be. That's not part of our realm, so to speak. With me, I was open to the idea of Bigfoot. I had my encounter back in the early 80s, which convinced me that they exist. But now, this dogman creature, that's kind of taken, that's a big leap right there to accept that he exists. But I have to. I know he does. So, like I say, even today, it's something that's an issue. I recently started a new job in Houston, doing what I did years ago, which is basically running a drill rig. And normally, the drill rigs, it's horizontal boring. You're alongside the roadways, out in the open. The job I'm on now, it just happens to be backed up into the woods. The back half of the machine is in some pretty dense woods with a lot of brush in between the trees. Pretty much the whole time I'm sitting there drilling, I'm wondering what's looking at me. And every once in a while I have to get off the machine to go adjust some hoses, water hoses and such, which puts me right back there in the woods. And the whole time I'm back there, I'm really not watching what I'm doing. I'm watching what's in the tree line there. Why do I do that? Because I had that encounter, because I know what exists. I guess that's the best way to answer your question. That's how it's affected me.
All these responses that you've had to that encounter are perfectly normal. Almost any eyewitness that I speak to, that's going to be one of the questions I pretty much count on being asked is it normal for an eyewitness, for me, to be this shaken so long after that encounter happened? The answer is definitely yes. When you compare that to anything else that's going to happen to you in your life, what's going to compare to that? There's no way to ever prepare yourself for something like that. A Bigfoot encounter is very unnerving, obviously, but even that, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinions, still doesn't compare to how creepy, how terrifying it is to encounter something like that dog man that you encountered when you were 13. The fact that you were only 13 when you had that encounter, that just makes it even more traumatic for you, obviously. Before we move on with that angle, you mentioned something I want to touch on. You said that you did have a Bigfoot encounter. Could you tell us the details of that?
Sure. This was approximately in 82, 83. I had just recently gotten married, and due to our work schedules, we hadn't had a chance to have a little honeymoon or whatever. Like I say, I lived in Metropolis, Illinois, which is right across the river from Kentucky. Well, in western Kentucky is a lake that it's just huge. It's called Kentucky Lake, and it's got hundreds of miles of shoreline. Most people have heard of LBL, Land Between the Lakes, TVA, stuff like that. It's all kind of intertwined right there. My wife and I had just bought a boat, so we decided to spend the weekend on Kentucky Lake. So we went out that Saturday morning and did a little fishing, went skiing, and just basically had a lazy day on the water. Probably about 7:30, 8 o'clock, it was starting to get dark. It was going to be dark within the next hour, so we decided we would put in the shore somewhere, set up our tent, spend the night. So we found a quiet, secluded bay and pulled right up there on the little sandy beach, and I tied the boat off to a stump that was there. And to describe the beach, it was from the water, the beach was probably, say, 15 or 20 feet, maybe of pure sand from the water's edge up to where some bushes started. And the bushes ran as far as the shoreline did. There was an incline, relatively fairly steep, of the bushes up into the tree line. And that was probably another 20 feet. So you had a relatively flat beach that was 20 feet, and you had your steep incline up into the trees, which was another 20 feet. We set up it was just a little two-man tent, and I'm a big guy, so I pretty much filled it up on my own. We built us a little fire and just kind of wound down. And by the time we were ready to crawl into the tent, it was well after dark. We crawled inside and zipped up the flaps, and by the way, the flaps and the zippers were facing the water away from the trees. seemed like the thing to do. We laid there. We were just exhausted from the day. So I'm assuming that probably laid there 5 or 6 minutes, something like that, and started to drift off. And I can remember hearing a sound that was similar to shuffling, but it didn't last very long, maybe 4 or 5 seconds. It didn't seem like it was far from the tent. So my mind became aware of that, and you're running through, okay, what could it be out there, a raccoon, something, I don't know. I wasn't really concerned. And then I kind of heard the proverbial twig snap, just about the only way to describe it. So I didn't get really in a hurry, but I leaned up and I unzipped. I think the zipper went down first, then across on the other zippers. I unzipped it, kind of crawled half my body out the tent and looked. And when I did, I didn't see a darn thing. Didn't hear a movement. I stood up outside the tent, and it was just me, and my wife was inside the tent. So I probably stood there 30 seconds. I was not really concerned, and crawled back in the tent, zipped it up again. So this time we laid there talking about it. We just kind of slowly drifted off again. And probably another 10 minutes passed, and I heard a sound that I could distinctly tell was in the brush towards the head of the tent. And it was coming closer. Then the sound stopped. I said, all right, something's messing with us. So I unzipped the tent again, got out, and this time, up in the tree line, I heard movement. But it's so dark I couldn't see anything. So I told my wife, I said, something is messing with us. It keeps coming back. I'm not sure what's going on. So at this point, I'd say I'm a little concerned. I've got her to protect, me to protect, what's going on. So the only weapon I had was my hatchet that I used to chop up a little bit of firewood. So what I decided to do was take the hatchet in the tent with me, and I was going to leave the flap unzipped this time, so I didn't waste time in case whatever it was came back. So crawled up in the tent with my hatchet, and I'm laying on my back, and then in typical newlywed fashion, she's laying on her side and with her head in the crook of my arm, which put my left arm running down the edge of the tent, right up against the side wall of it. We were there a very short period of time, this time less than 5 minutes, and I heard the sound in the brush again, and it was steps. It wasn't fast, it wasn't quick, but it was slow and steady. Then the sound quit, and in about 5-10 seconds, I heard something just right outside the tent. At that point, like I said, my arm was up against the sidewall. At that point, something stepped on my arm, and it covered from the back of my hand to my elbow was pressed down into the floor of the tent, into the sand of the beach, and it was heavy. And I think, as I recall, I let out a whoop and a holler and jerked my arm out from underneath whatever it was. And you could just hear it going quickly away through the brush. And I think I jerked up a couple of the tent stakes as I was trying to get out of the dang thing. But basically, I was in a panic. Like I said earlier, when you're in an incident, your mind goes 1,000 miles an hour. My mind was working. I knew there was nothing that should have been that big to cover up my arm. So I'm outside the tent with a hatchet in my hand. She's trying to untangle herself from the mess of the tent. And at that point, I decided that we were going to leave the beach. So my boat was tied into the tree line. I basically chopped the rope down on the beach. I did not go untie it. We left everything on the beach, hopped in the boat, and took out to get as far away from shore as we could. There was a marina a couple miles away. I just motored right up into that marina, found an empty boat slip. I didn't care if somebody was renting it or not, but it was empty, so I put my boat into it, and we got out of there, went and got in the car, and went to a motel. And at the motel, we called my family and her family, told them what had happened, and asked them to meet us there the next morning, which they did. And then we all piled back in the boat. We went back to that same beach. And as we were pulling up to the beach, everything looked like we left it. The tent was in a complete disarray, did not appear to be tampered with in any way. Our miscellaneous things were there, my cooler and such. And of course, on the way over there, you're wondering just what was it? What could it have been? And I had my suspicions. I believed at that time I had just had a Bigfoot encounter. Everybody said, well, let's look for tracks. Didn't really find anything definitive track-wise. You could see where something had been coming through the brush towards the tent. It was broken over, mashed and such, down into the sand. You could see as it came down the incline where it had scooted the feet or whatever. Was there a definitive track? Not really. We found what one could say might have been a fairly clear half track of the front of the foot, and it was very deep into the hard sand. And like I say, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", 275 pounds, and I could not make a track as deep as this was. Had I had that encounter in today's time, I would have had a lot more knowledge of things to look for, how to interpret the signs that were there, simply because of what's available to us now, that we can learn from now. Back then, like I said before, the Bigfoot phenomenon was not widespread. Nobody really talked a lot about it, at least in the circles I was in. So didn't really know what to look for and didn't know what we were actually looking at. But I can assure you from that point on, I knew what had stepped on my arm. That's my Bigfoot encounter.
That's pretty bad luck to have two encounters like that with two different types of cryptids. When you felt that foot on your arm, Wade, for a brief second at least, or even before that when you heard that twig snap out there in the darkness, for at least a brief second, did something in the back of your mind instantly switch on and say, Dogman?
No. That's my first honest answer to your question. I don't know why. Looking back on it logically, perhaps that's what one would have thought would have popped into my mind. And quite frankly, Vic, I'm glad it didn't, because the Dogman thing just scared the heck out of me. And this was maybe 10 years after the Dogman encounter that I had in that basement. The Dogman just didn't come to my mind. The Bigfoot thing came to my mind afterwards. I just wasn't sure what was going on during all the action. And yes, it was scary. Yes, when it stepped on my arm, it was scary. Otherwise, it wouldn't have taken out like I did. I had her to protect it, got her out of there. But, looking back on it now, and even shortly thereafter, I didn't have there was really no fear there afterwards. I guess after I was safe, now that I think about it. The thought of Bigfoot then, no fear. It's not scary to me. The thought of going on a Bigfoot expedition now, if and when I could, there's no fear. It's not scary to me. It's enjoyable. It's something I would look forward to. But the Dogman, I want nothing to do with. That's scary. There's no fun in that. There's no eager anticipation to go on a Dogman expedition. In fact, after learning what I have and knowing what I saw back then, I really have no desire to go out in the woods looking for Bigfoot now like I always used to. So that's kind of a long answer to a short question that you asked. Did I think of Dogman? No, I did not.
Well, it's a good answer. What does that say, Wade, about how the two compare? When you had a dog man outside of the house you were in, and that encounter scared you so much more than being out in an exposed situation in a flimsy tent with a Bigfoot right outside on the other side of that tent wall from you.
Yeah, you're right. That's correct.
That says it all right there.
I know that there are reports of violent Bigfoot encounters, whether it's in books or here, there, wherever on the internet. But honestly, back then and even in today's times, to me, what I see, most of the encounters appear to be curiosity or no violence or whatever. There's nothing to really create a lot of terror. And I can remember telling my wife at the time, I said, we just got attacked by a Bigfoot. But, you know, once I calmed down and the situation was over, I remember telling her that it's not that big of a deal. Everything I've read about, they're curious. They just want to check us out. The dog man at 13, had I been in that tent out there then, would he have been curious, wanting to check us out, you know, and just kind of walked around the tent and gone off? And I don't know. I don't think so. He was overt. He beat on the window to make a point. What his point was is, hey, I'm here to scare you or whatever, but he made his presence known. And you're right. He's far more terrifying than the Bigfoot is to me.
I guess it's because of them looking so much. They look similar to us in the fact that they walk around on two legs most of the time. Sure, yeah, they do go down on all fours if the need suits them, but in a way they do look like us, walking around bipedally, having arms and all that, but that animalistic nature, when you look at that wolf or doggish type head, I think it's just something about that animalish appearance that just shakes us up so much when you see them compared to
Sure,
Bigfoot. From what you've said tonight, Wade, it sounds to me like after your dogman encounter, you coped with it and handled it better than you have been dealing with that encounter recently. Is that an accurate assumption?
I would say so. That's correct.
Now, what is it about what has happened recently? Did this angst come to the forefront after you had contacted me? Is that why you're a little more uptight about being out in the woods than you were, say, 10 years ago?
I would say that's probably true. You know, honestly, I never doubted what I saw when I was 13. I knew what I saw. You know, looking back on it now, perhaps I didn't. I'm not saying that I thought I was crazy, but maybe I left open a possibility that I might have imagined it, because what I saw is not supposed to exist. What I saw was a monster. And I never really accepted it, perhaps, until I was lucky enough to run across on the net you and other people like me who had seen these things, and I thought, oh my God, I'm not the only one. In fact, I'm one of hundreds, I guess, if not more, that have encountered this creature, and it does exist. So once I started realizing that I wasn't the only one, that I'm one of hundreds or thousands that have seen these things, then it really, I guess it hit home. This thing does exist. It's out there. It was kind of like the final nail in the coffin, I guess. I wasn't crazy. I didn't imagine it. That may be hard to put into words or for some people to understand. But at 13, okay, you're a kid. I know I saw it. I know it was there. But there was always that tiny little window going, or did I? Did I imagine this? Did Brian have the same hallucination I did? When you're at that age, you don't deal with things the way you do when you're mature. When you're older, the thought process is a lot different. I guess that's kind of, I'm dancing around the fire here, what I'm trying to say. As I matured and got older, the thought process matured as well, and it's like, okay, this really happened. And I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people like me. There's people like you who are out there for us to tell our stories, to listen to us. So it made it more, that's it. It's made it more real now. So the fact that it's more real now just gives you more reason to use your word angst or wonder what's looking at you from behind. It's more real.
I think also, Wade, I could be wrong, but I think something else that might play into why you are a little more anxious about the whole dogman thing now than you were before you found out about me is you listening to the shows that I've done and listening to other eyewitnesses share their encounters. That, I think, might be reinforcing the point for you that, hey, there just might be more of these things out there in the woods than I ever imagined that there were. I hope that isn't why you're having more trouble coping with your encounter than you used to have before you knew about me being out there and what I do. But I would bet pretty good money that that is playing a fairly strong part and why you are a little more nervous about this than what you used to be.
You're correct. It's that is another aspect of it. There's a bunch of aspects to consider about all of this, but that is a pretty big one. Back then, and growing older, into my 20s and 30s and such, I look back on that incident, and I didn't really consider that there were a bunch of them, or they were widespread. I considered if I had that encounter, it was one. He's in Southern Illinois. Well, gosh darn it, now I find out that they're everywhere. They're all over the country. So, you're just not safe anywhere. There's tribes of these things running around. And, and if they're out there, they're smart. So now I've got to wonder if I see 20 years at me looking through the bushes, is there two more of them behind me? The mind never shuts off. And the fact that now I know that there's untold numbers of them all over the country, if not more widespread than that, sure, that's a concern. We haven't heard on the news that a dog man walked into a restaurant and killed somebody or kidnapped anybody, but maybe we will someday. But, there's a lot of unexplained things that have happened that perhaps they could be responsible for. I can assure you, I believe in them. I know they exist.
Yeah, you definitely were not crazy. I know you mentioned the crazy word. You considered that for a moment, but you and Brian did not simultaneously hallucinate and imagine that you saw a dog man at the window. Yeah, you definitely saw what you think you saw. Yeah, when I mention the fact that there are more of these things than most people will ever know, I don't mean to cause any type of a panic in anyone, but I do think it's important that people know that that's reality. That's how it is. You're not going to walk into a dog man in the produce aisle at your local grocery store, but don't think for a second that they're so rare that if I go into my nearby large woods, there's no chance of bumping into one either. So why should I take the time to protect myself? Why should I worry about going out there alone or practicing good judgment? That just wouldn't be a good idea, in my opinion. One more thing on that topic I want to share. Like I've said before in other shows, for every one eyewitness that is willing to come forward and come on the show and share the details of their encounter with the public, there's a good solid 10, 12, or maybe even more people, more eyewitnesses that won't. So you can't judge how common of a phenomenon this is by how many people you hear on a radio show like mine that are coming forward and reporting what happened to them. You just can't do that. It's unfortunate, but that's how it is. Now, you've had some questions, Wade, about these things, about dogmen, for me. There was one question in particular that you said you wanted to ask regarding doorknobs. What was that
Correct.
question?
Well, I can't really tell you why this popped into my mind, but, and again, when that creature was beating on that glass, he had human-like hands. I can't say if it was an opposable thumb or whatever like that, but I just don't know. But I saw distinct long finger-style things with claws on them. It was not, for example, the paw of a dog. So, and again, I can't tell you why I had this question, but I did. It just popped in my mind one day. I wonder if they can manipulate doorknobs or handles, be it on a car or a home. So that was my question to you. Again, I have 1,001 questions if I can ever think of them, because I just can't get enough of trying to learn about these things. That's probably just one of the questions that's a drop in the bucket of all of them. But I find that interesting. Can they manipulate doorknobs, handles, and things like that? And I think I asked you in your reports that you've received or people you've spoken with, have you heard of that happening?
Unfortunately, the answer to your question is yes and yes. I have been told about situations where they have manipulated doorknobs on a house. I have also been told about situations where they have manipulated handles and levers to get into chicken coops and into barns, going in and slaughtering livestock. I've also been told about them manipulating door handles, levers on car doors to open them up as well. I don't know if that situation or those situations were dumb luck. Fiddle with that strange silver thing long enough, like I saw the human do, and that door opens up, or if it was a matter of them having more intelligence and figuring out without trouble. But yes, to answer your question, unfortunately, yes, they apparently can manipulate doorknobs and door handles on car doors under certain circumstances.
Right. Well, that certainly adds a whole new element to it, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I probably shouldn't share this. I don't want to shake anyone up. But there was a gentleman, I believe in 2009, that shared an encounter with me that is almost as creepy as your encounter, Wade. He lives right there on the edge of the LBL and has a large doggy door in his back door. And one night, he heard a commotion downstairs. Nothing too loud, but enough to get his attention. If I remember correctly, I think he went to the top of the steps, looked down the steps, and he had a clear view of his back door. He told me that he could see a dog man that was trying to gain entry into his house through that large doggy door. It was too big to get through. It was only partly through. One arm, I think, and its head was all it could get into the house. But
Right.
the image of that, the idea that it was trying to get into his home, I really wonder. I wonder what its motivation was. What would have happened? That's some really creepy stuff right there.
To me, it would be fairly obvious that if he's smart enough to know that that's a possible entry into the home where the human is, he knows the human's in there, he can smell him and see him or whatever. And if he's bold enough to try to get in, then he's bold enough to take control of the situation, whatever he wants to do. He had no good on his mind, I'm sure.
I'd say.
But he's putting himself into a position that just mere curiosity would, I don't think that was it. That's quite a story.
Yet the idea of something like that doesn't know what it is like to be inside of a home, for it to be bold enough to try and get into that home when I'm sure it knew people were in that home, that is just such a creepy idea. There are a lot of things like that I can't share with the general public because the eyewitness that shared these details, whatever they were, with me, they don't want them put out there.
Sure.
If you don't know about something like that, then how can you protect yourself from it?
Exactly right.
In closing, Wade, do you have any closing questions or any closing points you'd like to make?
Wow. I don't guess at the moment I have any questions. After we finish this interview, and I'll put my mind to it, and the thoughts will start rolling. That's when the questions will come. But the only thing I want to say is I can't tell you, and I know you probably heard this 100 times, I can't tell you the relief I had when I found you and you were able to answer my questions. And basically, I found out that, no, I wasn't crazy. I did see that. It's out there. And I can assure you it does exist. My eyes did not lie to me that night, nor did they lie to Brian. And let me add that over all the years, Brian and I stayed in contact. We spoke to each other once or twice a year, generally. And almost every time that subject came up, and we'd compare notes, and we both saw the same thing. That's my closing thought is they do exist. And everybody needs to educate themselves on it, just like I'm trying to do. So thank you for being there, Vic. You've helped out a lot.
You're more than welcome. I'm just so glad you found me. I'm so glad I was able to help. When we first started talking and you shared your encounter with me, the two things I wanted to accomplish, making sure I got the point across to you that you're not crazy, and also getting the point across to you that you're not alone. It's so easy when you don't know any more about these things than most people do. It's so easy to think that it's just you that this happened to. Thanks again so much for coming on the show, Wade. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Vic. Appreciate it, too.
Thanks again so much. Don't be a stranger. If any more questions pop up, please do let me know.
Yes, sir. I'll holler at you.
That sounds really good. Well, have yourself a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Bye. Episode 11. Hello, thanks for tuning in to this special Wednesday night episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Condiff, and I'll be your host as we listen to eyewitness encounters involving one of the most terrifying cryptids, dogmen. Our guests tonight are Donna Wells Fink and Diane Beeson. Donna is a dogman researcher who's based out of Milton, Wisconsin. Diane is an author who has a fictional dogman book that's going to be hitting the presses soon. Donna and Diane, welcome to Dogman Encounters Radio. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Please, both of you, give us a brief bio on yourselves.
This is Donna, and I became interested in the dogman from reading Linda Godfrey's books about the Beast of Bray Road, which is only about a half an hour down the road from my house. And I didn't realize that there were things like that out there that existed. And then in her books also, I started reading about that there were sightings close by my home of Bigfoot by Lima Marsh, which is very close to my home. So when my kids were grown, I found somebody who was interested too, and we just started going out in the field and looking for Bigfoot and the dogman. And it's been a real interesting adventure since then.
Diane, how about your bio?
This is Diane, and I live in Cincinnati, so I'm in a very urban area, and I first came across the whole idea of dogman on a podcast interview I heard with Linda Godfrey. Anyway, I heard an interview with her probably 6 or 7 years ago, and it absolutely blew my mind. And so I went over to my sister's house, and I said, I got to write a book about this, just sort of a fiction, because it was so bizarre and so chilling to me. And I said, you want to go to Wisconsin? And she goes, sure. So we took off, and we came up to Wisconsin for a long weekend and just checked it out and had a great time. And it's been sort of one might call it a dogman love affair in a very bizarre way ever since.
How did the two of you meet?
We actually met at Creature Weekend last year. Donna was there with a friend of hers. I was there with my sister and my niece, and my niece wanted a T-shirt like the one Donna had that had her logo for her Southern Wisconsin Wild Ones Facebook group. And so anyway, we got in contact with Donna then and just started talking, and we haven't shut up since.
We're kindred souls. We found that we probably go way back. If you believe in past lives, yeah.
I can tell you two get along really well together, so that's good.
Yes. Yeah. It's too bad we don't live closer.
That is a shame. Cincinnati and where you live, Donna, in Wisconsin, that is a pretty good drive, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's too bad.
What kind of experience in the woods did each of you have before you started researching dogman?
For me, it was really almost none, other than just regular standard growing up stuff, camping and that kind of stuff. I am not a big outdoors woman. I'm the first one to admit that. So I have very little experience in the woods. I don't know what's out there.
But she's so well read and so well versed in all the paranormal aspects that it's just a great match. And they're coming up this weekend, and we're going out to the Bigfoot Dogman area. So yeah, we'll have to keep you posted on what goes on this weekend.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'd love to know. Last weekend, you two spent some time in and around Salt Fork and in Coshocton County. How did that go for you?
We had fun.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I have to tell you, this is kind of an interesting, and really this is about Bigfoot, but when we were there last fall was the first time we rented this particular cabin. Donna, unfortunately, wasn't with us that time, but we had noticed that this was a very remote cabin. It's on 42 isolated acres, out in just farm country. And it's very near a place called Woodbury Wildlife Area, which has been known to have a lot of, Bigfoot activity and so forth. anyway, when we were up at this cabin that weekend, we had noticed all weekend long, all the dogs in the surrounding farms were very, very vocal all weekend. A lot of just nonstop barking going on. And I didn't know. I just figured these dogs always just barked all the time. What do I know? But then one night, we were all sitting out on the deck and we heard the strangest, I'm going to call it a call. It wasn't really a howl, but it was the strangest call we had ever heard. And the dog that was barking before this started had shut up. This call went on. It was a long, high-pitched, like a mournful sound, a call ongoing for 30 seconds at least. It just pierced the night air. And we all just froze in our seats and were completely blown away. And as soon as this call stopped, all the dogs just lit up. They just went ballistic all around. Now, I don't know what that call was from, but we've heard something very similar on various recordings of purported Bigfoot calls and vocalizations. So I'm thinking it might be something like that. I've since been to that cabin 2 other times and have not heard the call. And not only that, all the farm dogs in the area have been very, very quiet. And I just kind of put it together this weekend, and I'm thinking maybe that's why those dogs were so agitated all weekend, was because something was in the area, whereas the last 2 times we were here, it was very, very quiet and nothing happened. Just an interesting little observation, that's all.
Hearing a creepy call like that would get your attention. Diane, the first time that you heard the term dog man, did you scoff at it and say, that just couldn't be? Someone's just got a big imagination, or did you remain open to the possibility that dog men just might be a reality?
I was open to it, to tell you the truth, and I think it's because of all of Linda's research. I mean, the first time I even heard it was Linda Godfrey doing this interview on this podcast. And I believe at that time she had just come out with her second book, which was Hunting the American Werewolf, I think, if I have them in order right. And she was going over all the research that she had done and listening to all of that. It seemed, while really bizarre, it seemed plausible to me. So I thought the term dogman was kind of bizarre, but, I'm open to a lot of things. I'll look at, let's put it this way. I don't just shut my mind off to things when I hear something a little different. I'll go ahead and look into it. So that's kind of where I'm from.
Well, that's a good thing that you're open-minded like that. Donna, how about you? The first time you heard the term dogman, did you scoff or take it seriously?
Well, I always look at it as there's so many people seeing things and they describe them and they're normal. They seem to be normal, credible eyewitnesses, and I don't understand how people can say, you didn't see that, or I don't believe in it, when it's been seen by so many. Oh, even Bigfoot, anything, the Loch Ness Monster, any kind of paranormal thing, if it's been seen by a lot of people and they're credible eyewitnesses. The dogman was seen here in Wisconsin by a young lady who took a lie detector test and appeared on Monster Quest. And she saw 3 dogmen drinking out of a stream using their cupped hands. And then they rose up and started walking towards the kids. And, of course, they all got into their cars and took off. And she even passed her lie detector test. So I just, you get credible people talking about unbelievable things, and something has to be going on. That's the way I look at it.
Katie Zahn is who you're talking about there in Wisconsin. Yes. They had those encounters.
Yes.
Speaking of Katie, I need to talk to her, see if I could maybe interest her in coming on for a show.
I have contacted her a couple of times because she's a Facebook friend, and she lives right here in Milton in my same town. And I've tried to get her to do an interview with me just so I could put it on YouTube or something so people could hear more about her experience, because, of course, on Monster Quest, they kind of briefly go over what she saw and everything, but I would like to go into more detail about her sighting and everything. And she told me on Facebook that she really wasn't afraid. She was never afraid of the dogmen. So they didn't instill any fear in her when she saw them. And that's about all I've gotten from her so far. So I wish you luck. I hope so, because I'd love to hear from her.
I know you two haven't spent too much time out in the field together, but I do know you've spent at least some time out there. What outing researching dogmen wound up scaring the two of you the most?
Go ahead, Diane.
I'll go ahead and kind of tell my one and only, aside from, okay, I'm going to stutter all over myself here. There were two times that I went out, okay, and the most recent was when we came out there last year and visited you, Donna, and you took us out into the woods and some just strange things happened, but it wasn't particularly frightening per se. I have to say I haven't really been scared in the woods in my research because I haven't seen one. But I have gone out. I have gone out and looked for them. Our initial trip up there was pretty interesting. And if you'd like, Vic, I can tell you about that.
Sure. Love to hear.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this was when my sister Jill and I, when I decided that I was gonna, write a story about the whole dogman thing, we took a trip up to Wisconsin. And it was in June, and it was beautiful weather, and we just hit the road and headed up there, with Linda's books in hand and, as much information as we could gather, which, aside from Linda's books, was about all we could find. And we got up there with the goal of spending a lot of time in the Kettle Moraine forest up there. We had some experiences, just really more observations than anything else while we were there that we thought were pretty strange. And the first thing that happened, we stopped at the edge of the park at this little cafe store, kind of like a little quickie mart, to buy some cappuccinos. And when we were at the checkout, the cash register, the cashier was run by a woman clearly of Native American ethnicity, and we asked her if there were any bears in the area, because we knew we'd be spending some time tromping around in the woods and didn't know if we had to think about bears. And she just kind of started laughing and said, no, she goes, there aren't any bears out there. She said, bears are not the problem. And she just started, chuckling to herself. And I was surprised by this and I didn't ask her further, and I kick myself to this day for not asking her further. But as we went ahead and paid for our coffee, she stood there just chuckling to herself and laughing and shaking her head and saying, not bears, not bears. So that led us to believe she knew something which we were, not with it enough at the moment to ask her about.
Uh-oh.
And yeah, so that was just kind of the first thing that happened when we were there. And then we went to the visitor center in the park, and they've got a very nice visitor center there, and we were walking around in there looking at all this stuff, and I was going to go to the restroom, which was out through the double doors, and out on the other side of the building. And as I was leaving through the airlock, I almost ran right into a forest ranger who was coming in the door. And he was a very nice young fellow, and he was all smiles and happy and everything. And I decided then I wasn't going to make the same mistake as I made with the cashier at the Quickie Mart. So I asked him, I said, hey, what do you make of these werewolf things out here? And the smile dropped from his face, and he leaned in and looked at me and said, are you camping here? Have you seen or heard something? And that took me aback, and again, I dropped the ball on that, and I just kind of said, oh, no, I just read about it in a book. And then his demeanor changed again, and he started laughing. He goes, oh, that. He goes, wait, what are you talking about again? And I said, those wolves that supposedly walk on their back legs? And he goes, oh, no. We don't have that down here. I think further north, maybe further north. He goes, well, I don't really know. He goes, hey, ask one of the night rangers because we don't ever see that stuff during the day. And boy, he bolted out of there so quick. And
Strange.
I thought this was really strange.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Wow.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting that kind of reaction, that shift from happy to serious to then, backpedaling and blowing off, I mean, it was really strange. So that was pretty interesting. So then we decided that while we were out, because we knew that they were often seen with roadkill on the side of the road. Obviously they have a scavenger role to some degree. And so we thought, well, we had a map, and we thought, okay, we're going to drive all around the area, and we're going to mark on the map all the places where we see dead animals on the side of the road, and then we were going to come back at night and check all these places out and kind of just cruise the area, hoping to see something eating on the roadkill.
Yeah,
and I want you to know.
Eating.
What's that?
I said to see if you could catch one eating.
Exactly,
yeah.
because that's how a lot of people see them. We drove around that entire county for 4 days, Victor, and we did not see any roadkill anywhere. There was one little tiny dead black thing, like maybe a baby raccoon or something. That was all we saw in 4 days. And this was on expressways, county roads, park roads, residential streets, highways, everything. I mean, it was completely clean, completely void of all roadkill. I've never seen anything like it. And I thought this was really strange. And so, we asked a couple of people that we kind of ran into randomly here and there, remarking upon it, and they said, oh, Wisconsin's just a really clean state. And I went, okay, all right, that's fine. Well, we'll go ahead and buy that. But what was really interesting is when we left Wisconsin to go home, we came straight south into Illinois, and we were still very keen on the whole roadkill thing, and we're on the expressway, and we had driven maybe a half an hour into Illinois, still not seeing any roadkill, when all of a sudden, just like that, all of a sudden, here they are, dead dog, dead bird, dead raccoon, dead deer, dead, peppered all over. You know how it is, like it is here in Ohio, there's roadkill everywhere. And when we got home, I noted this, and when we got home, I was looking in Linda's book for the range of sighting reports that people make for the Dogman, and it was all around, that area of Wisconsin, of course, and it went down about 30 miles into the northern part of Illinois. I thought that was interesting. And it's not that I think necessarily that Dogman just picks all the roadways clean. I think that we wondered, I guess I should say, if maybe the counties or whatever just keep it clean just to reduce maybe sightings. I don't know. It was just a thought I had, but I found it really interesting. So if Wisconsin is really a clean state, then how come that top part of Illinois is also very, very clean? And it just happens to coincide with the range of Dogman sightings, at least at that time. I don't know if that's changed over the years, but that's the way it was then.
I can tell you, living in Wisconsin, there's roadkill everywhere over here, all over the state. So if it's clean there's a reason for it somehow.
Right. I mean, there has to be. And it was just very, very strange to me. You wouldn't normally pay any attention to that either unless you were specifically looking for it. Another thing that was very interesting, too, and this was about specifically Kettle Moraine, there are no garbage receptacles anywhere in the park, even at like trailheads and stuff, even in the bathrooms. There were no trash cans anywhere for you to throw out your picnic or anything. Another thing that we had also noticed was that their dogmen are often seen, rummaging through people's garbage cans too. And that was another part. We wanted to kind of note where all the trash cans were and go through and check those out too, but there weren't any of those either, except in the camping areas where there were dumpsters that were fenced in, or enclosed, I should say, behind 3 walls 8 feet high of concrete, the cinder block, with the front big heavy gates and heavy chains chaining those things shut. And there aren't supposed to even be any bears, and even if there are bears, there's very few. I can't imagine that they did all of this to block an occasional random bear that may happen to wander through the area. I could see that in places where you've got a heavy bear population. But why are they protecting these dumpsters so much in these camping areas? I thought that was weird, too.
The walls that they had over around the dumpsters, was there any kind of a ceiling to keep something from climbing that wall and getting over?
I did not notice that, no. I don't think so. The walls were just very high. Like I said, they were like 8 feet high. So I suppose if something was very adept at climbing, it could have gotten over that way, but it really would have had to make quite a jump.
Dogmen are supposed to be quite the jumpers, so if all they had was an 8-foot wall, that shouldn't pose pretty much any kind of a barrier to them.
Oh.
But who's to say the people that constructed those walls didn't know any better, so... As far as the whole roadkill topic goes, Diane, that's very interesting, but with as widespread as dogmen are, like you mentioned towards the end of that point, I think it's a matter of the municipalities cleaning up the roadkill rather than having such high populations of dogmen that you wind up with clean roads because, like I said, they're so widespread. If it was actually dogmen that were responsible for that, then I think the clean roads would be a lot more widespread than what you're seeing.
Right, and that's what we thought too, that it wasn't necessarily the dogman picking them clean, it was the municipalities cleaning it all up, and we were just making guesses. This is all just guesswork, but it's simply observations that are interesting.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And there was one other thing too that was interesting about our visit there to Kettle Moraine, and on 2 separate nights, Jill and I went out at night, very late at night, after it was dark, and just went and sat, like there was one time we went to it was a trailhead, and they had some picnic tables there, and a restroom, and a parking lot, and it was just a trailhead, so there's nothing else there, and it was closed, nobody else was there, it was dark, and we just went and sat back to back on the top of a picnic table, armed with flashlights, and decided, well, by God, we're just going to sit here for real quiet for like a couple hours or whatever, and every now and then randomly turn on a flashlight and shine it into the woods to see if anything's coming out. I don't know. Looking back on that, that was probably pretty stupid. But we did it. We did it because we just wanted to see something so bad. Well, nothing happened. But what was interesting is this is in the summer in the woods in Wisconsin, and this was the quietest woods I've ever sat in. There was no sounds of the night, no tree frogs, not even crickets. I mean, no nightbirds, nothing. It was the quietest, and we were there for several hours, and we heard no sounds whatsoever. I thought that was weird, too. Again, we didn't see anything, but these are just observations that we made when we were up there that was different than any place else we'd ever been, so I thought it was interesting.
Well, that's not a good sign that the forest was that quiet. That's a pretty good sign that there might have been something there watching you. Yikes.
Yeah, and that happened on 2 different nights in 2 different places, too, so I don't know. I just, any time I've ever been to any forest, they're noisy places at night.
Oh, sure.
So.
Yeah, like a concert almost. Donna, do you take anything special out into the field with you when you go?
I take my camera and my cell phone, of course, in case something grabs me and I can call somebody. And I take pepper spray and a knife to protect myself more from humans or cougars rather than Bigfoot or the dogman, because I've been in those areas so much and nothing has ever harmed me, and I know that there's things in the woods, and I'm not really afraid of, I haven't seen a dogman, so maybe I'll be afraid when I see one, but nothing's ever harmed me when I've been in the woods. I just worry more about humans, really.
That comment that you just made poses a question. If you were to encounter a dogman out in the woods, do you have a plan in place for how to
How to run faster.
Yeah, or how to trip Diane, maybe.
You just have to be the one that runs faster. The girl I used to research with was 6 foot tall, and she was 15 years younger, and she did take off on me once, and I grabbed her before she could get away, and I told her, if you leave me here alone, there's no way I'm going alone. So,
what happened?
Well, that was when we were in our Bigfoot woods where it's like we went looking for Bigfoot because I'd heard there'd been a couple of sightings in the area. I read about one in the newspaper. I went back into the archives and I read that there were a couple out by Lima Marsh, which is only about 9 miles from me. And I'd always been interested in Bigfoot, so we went looking for Bigfoot, and what happened was it seemed like a portal opened and all kinds of weirdness came out. Not only do we think that we have Bigfoot there because we've cast prints that were 17.5-inch long, and then come spring there were 14-inch prints, 11-inch prints, and then by July of that year there were 9-inch prints. And we've cast them all, I videotaped them, there's trails of prints. I don't find as many prints anymore. I think they wised up to us and they said, oh, maybe we should stop walking out in the middle of a cornfield. So I don't find as many prints anymore, but what happened was in looking for Bigfoot, I think we ran into an area where the Dogman is also. I'm not sure what else out there. We went into the woods one day, crossed over, went around a mud puddle sort of. It didn't have a lot of water in it, but went into the woods. There were no prints in the puddle when we went in. But then when we came out of the woods, there were 2 wolf prints in the mud that weren't there when we went in. And then later that night at 2 o'clock in the morning, Linda Godfrey reported to me the next day that at 2 o'clock in the morning, a girl that went to her church called her and reported seeing an oversized wolf with glowing blue eyes sitting on the corner by our Bigfoot woods. And that's when things started getting weird. Then we started finding 5.5-inch wolf prints all around, even in the middle of the Bigfoot prints, all near the Bigfoot prints. I don't know why. I thought, if they were buddies and they were hanging out together, I didn't know what was going on. And we cast a bunch of those prints and trails of wolf prints. It seemed that there was only one wolf, so I'm not sure. And then one time and this is bizarre, but, I would take a lie detector test. It happened. If you believe me, you believe me. If you don't, you don't. But we were going out to our research area a week from that, a week later, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, sunny afternoon, going to our research area, heading out, and we were driving east, and in on the westbound shoulder was a young man walking, and his hair was shocking because it was completely matted, like he had been living under leaves under a bridge for a couple of years, but his clothes were clean, which was weird. And he had on a zip-up hoodie, but underneath it was a red plaid flannel shirt, and blue jeans and blue Keds. I'll never forget it. And he was shocking to look at his hair, but then when he looked up, we both screamed at the same time. And it was because he had a pronounced brow, not huge, but bigger than normal. But what was really shocking, he had dark circles around his eyes, and his nose to his lip was a bigger space than a normal human. And it kind of looked like a gorilla or a chimpanzee mouth that protruded. So it was a protruding mouth, but not as much as a muzzle. And big flat teeth that were twice the size of ours. You could see almost all the top teeth and all the bottom teeth. And Jackie said she saw fangs. I didn't because I was driving, and I was going 60 miles an hour, so I'm not sure. But his teeth were streaked with green and brown and yellow. They were awful. And we both screamed at the same time. So we thought, we're not letting this pass. We're making a U-turn. We're coming back. But to tell you the truth, I didn't want to pull over next to him because at this point I'm thinking skinwalker, shapeshifter, I don't know what it was. And because it wasn't a normal human. And I went past him, we pulled in by the cemetery, we turned around so that we could get video and pictures, because we knew he was going to come walking by us, you know, in the next couple of minutes, because he was headed that way. And all of a sudden a white van came, driving east like we were, made a U-turn. The white van was completely unmarked, brand new, had like a raised roof on it, so like you could stand up inside the van. And a man was driving it. I don't know if there were two men in there or just one, but it pulled up next to him, and Jackie was yelling, "They're going to pick him up. They're going to pick him up." And I said, "No, they're not. Who would pick him up?" And suddenly the cargo van doors are opened. The guy got out, opened the cargo door vans. I don't know whether the weird boy got in. That's what we called him. Either he got in or he was put in. I don't know. But then the door shut. They made another U-turn, and we pulled out right behind them, and they disappeared. I was doing 70 miles an hour trying to catch up to them, pulling out probably 10 seconds after they did. And we went 70 miles an hour looking down both sides, all the driveways, all the side roads. Never could find that van because we wanted to catch up to them and see what was going on. And that van just completely disappeared. So I don't know what that was. And then shortly after that, a couple of months later, my husband and I were coming home. It was about 7 in the evening, about 2 miles from my house, coming into town, and we think a deer is coming across the road, and then we realize it's not a deer. We had to completely stop the car to let a wolf saunter, trot across the road in front of us, looked like a brown timber wolf, and then go across the side of the road and then just go on into the field. It didn't look at me. It just kind of glanced around and just trotted across the road, big as you please. And I thought, I don't think that's a coincidence, but I don't know. And then one time we were in the woods and we knew something was in there with us. And as we left the woods to go, we had to cut across about a block and a half of cornfield to get back to the truck. And it was getting dusk. We were in there later than we should have been, than we planned to be, but we were kind of disoriented in there, even though we'd been in there a lot and we knew the area. We were having a hard time finding our way out of there for some reason. But we finally found our way out. We were 10 feet out of the woods and we heard one wolf howl, very loud, with kind of a laugh at the end of it. And we just took off running for the truck. And I told Jackie, I said, you know, we had 1 week flashlight between us because we weren't going to be out after dark. And I said, shine that flashlight behind me, you know, because she's running faster than I am. And she goes, why? And I said, because I want to know if there's a dog man coming. And she said, what difference does it make? And I said, because I'll run faster. And we just kept running. There was nothing coming. It didn't chase us. I think it was just messing with us. I think it was in there the whole time. It's 2 square blocks of woods in this area. And I think it was in there the entire time and was just messing with us. Like just trying to scare us or goofing around or whatever. It didn't try to hurt us. We were in there walking around and it was in there somewhere.
You've had some strange activity going on around you.
Like a mini Skinwalker Ranch, if you ask me.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. Really strange activity. Now, I know about all the videos you have on YouTube, Donna. The one that jumps out at me the most as being the most interesting is the one where you're interviewing Travis about his encounter. Could you share with the listeners what happened to Travis?
I heard about Travis and his sighting through friends, and he was willing to go out to Stores Lake with us where he had his sighting. He was with, in 2010, he was with 2 or 3, 4 guys. They were looking for the dogman. They had heard about it on television or the radio, some program, and, you know, it was around Halloween, and so they were talking up the Beast of Bray Road and everything. So those guys thought they'd go out because Travis lives here in Moulton with me, you know, in the same area. And Stores Lake is about 2 miles from our house, so they went out there, drug around a piece of bloody venison. There's 2 lakes and a pond there. All of a sudden, something came crashing up from the pond, up the steep hill towards them, and they at first thought it was a deer. And then, as it ran past them, they thought it was a bear, don't have bears here, but there might be an occasional one. I don't know. The DNR will tell you there are no bears here. And then they noticed that it had, the back legs were like dog legs. And they ran like heck to their car, and they started to drive away because they were so scared, and because they knew this was something really unusual. And they all calmed down, and Travis said, this is why we came here. We came here to see a dog man. We need to go back and see if we can find it. So they came back down the path, down the road. It's paved. And they were shining the flashlight around, and all of a sudden on the right-hand side of the road, in the brush, almost into the woods, but not quite, into chest-deep brush, was about a 5 or 6 foot dog man. He said that it had yellow eyes. They didn't glow, he said, but when they shined the flashlight in its eyes, it didn't cover up its eyes or anything, but it was standing there on 2 legs. And he said it had pointed ears that stood up. It had a muzzle. And you don't know, young people, are they telling you a story? Are they just making it up? Are they embellishing? Just some things that he said, and I've talked to him several times. His story has not changed one iota. And some of the things he said, you wouldn't know unless you've done a lot of research. Like, they wouldn't say that it came up on 4 legs unless you know a lot about the Dogman and Bigfoot stories. I would think you would say, yeah, it growled at us or it chased us or something. He didn't say any of that. He said that it didn't make any move towards them. It didn't make a sound. It just stood there. Of course, at that point, then they ran back to the car and took off and never went back. And he hadn't been back to that site. They were too afraid to go back until we went back during the daytime. Went back in the daytime, took his statement, and then went down to the pond to investigate. Even though it was like 2 years later, there were prints all around the pond, at least on the sides we were on, and it looked like Bigfoot prints, but it also looked like some weird, long, narrow prints, like with toes kind of like a dog, but then longer and narrower, almost like a dog would, if it was walking on 2 legs, would almost put down part of its back leg in order to steady itself. I'm not sure. I can't swear that it's a dog man. I don't know. But they were odd prints. And then I followed some structures up through there. I've been in there a lot. I found deer legs hanging from trees, partial spines of the animals in the trees. I found a deer leg the other day. It could be anything. I don't know. I don't know what could put a deer leg up in a tree. It wasn't hunting season. It was a fresh leg. You could still see the blood. But then I thought I heard rock clacking behind me, so I'm not sure what's going on in there. Obviously something is, because we smelled something terrible that wafted through the area when we were looking at the prints a couple of times. So it came from up on the hill in the woods and just wafted down through there like twice, and we all smelled it and commented on, oh my God, what is that smell? And then it just went away. So I'm not sure that there's Dogman and Bigfoot in there. According to his report, and he drew a picture of it, it looks like a Dogman.
I watched that video and he seemed genuine. I think he saw what he claims that he did see.
I believe so too, because I was really careful I talked to him at least 3 times, once before we interviewed him and then 2 or 3 times after. And the funny thing is that about a year after that, he was staying, probably 5 miles down the road near Lima Marsh where his grandmother lives. And he was up in the upstairs bedroom sleeping, and all of a sudden he heard a big howl outside his window, some kind of either Bigfoot or Dogman noise. And what he was most concerned about was that he was praying that his dog did not come out of its doghouse, and was listening for the chain on the dog to make sure that the dog did not come out and be harmed. He was that afraid. And I believe him there again, because he was more concerned about the dog than he was about telling me any kind of story. He didn't see what was out there. He couldn't find anything. He didn't want to wake his grandpa up because he knew that he had to go to work the next morning. and it seemed to go away, and the dog never came out of its doghouse. It was a German Shepherd, and it didn't come out of its doghouse.
Thank goodness it didn't come out of the house.
Yes, yeah. So I believe him because he seems sincere about worrying more about the dog than anything.
Yeah, he seems credible. Diane, what kind of homework did you have to do in preparation for writing your book? You're writing a book, from what I understand, that hasn't been edited yet, but I believe it will be soon, and consequently it will be out on bookshelves before too long, correct?
I certainly hope so. It's finished. It's edited and everything. Well, we're still trying to get an agent for it, and I didn't write it by myself. I did want to say this, I did have the help from my sister Jill as creative consultant. She's got some great ideas and really helped me sort of flesh the story out. And, and basically it just came, my research was pretty much just reading articles online and reading Linda's books and trying to find anything on podcasts. Oh, I wish your podcast was out back then, Vic, because I've been listening to it, ever since we first contacted you, and it's fantastic. I really love the stories that the people tell. So it was really just a lot of reading mostly, Linda's work and a few other, random articles here and there about it. But I get the impression that the whole concept of the Dogman has really gained in, I guess I'll call it popularity, or maybe I should say just recognition over recent years. More and more people are talking about it now than they used to. Yeah, so it was just reading, going up there, checking things out, talking to people, stuff like that.
I know the answer to this question before I ask it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Let me guess, you two would give almost anything to have been into Dogman the way you are now, back when the whole Beast of the Bray Road buzz hit, back when Linda Godfrey got into this.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Definitely.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
especially with Donna living right there.
I know.
And I didn't even know. I didn't even know until I was watching the Discovery Channel or something, and then I saw Linda Godfrey on there on some program, and she was talking about the Dogman, and I said, a Dogman? Oh, that's just so scary. And then Monster Quest came on, and I loved that program, and I was hooked. My kids were younger then, and, I really couldn't dedicate any time to it, but, as soon as I could get out there and get the nerve to go looking and have somebody to go with, that's when I started doing some research.
When we went up there and looked around, we talked to a lot of people, and it was amazing how many people had never even heard of it.
That's surprising.
And they were right there where it was all going down. Supposedly, according to, all Linda's research, kind of put that whole Kettle Moraine area sort of as Dogman Central, at least at that time, that we knew. And then after a while, I started to hear about, they called the Michigan Dogman and reports up there, and it's only been in the last few years that I start realizing, oh my God, they're everywhere. I had no idea. It blows my mind.
Yeah, you wouldn't believe how many people contact me with no concept of how widespread these things are. There are so many people out there that are convinced that Dogmen are only seen in and around the Great Lakes area. But yeah, they're seen in Maine. Shelley Rockwell Martin had her encounter in Maine. That's a lady that the episode of Paranormal Witness was done about, titled Wolfpack. Mm-hmm. You've got encounters happening in Canada, over on the West Coast, in Oregon, Washington State, California. These things are just all over the place. Down in Florida. Yeah, it's not a regional occurrence. Pretty much anywhere you go where there's a fairly large body of woods.
And they always seem scarier than a Bigfoot. When people encounter them, they get more of a feeling of evil than you do with a Bigfoot, for the most part. And that's what makes them so scary, too.
Oh, yeah. To back up a little bit here, Diane, What made you decide to write a fictional book about dogmen instead of a nonfiction book about them?
Well, I figured first of all that Linda Godfrey had all the nonfiction covered, you know, and you know, I have this imagination, you know, where I envision all these weird things, and I had never thought of writing about something like a dog man until I heard her stories and her interviews, and the more I looked into it, it's just so weird to me that I thought it would be fun to take this thing as a character and just weave a story around it. And it was a lot of fun to do, a lot of hard work, but yeah. So it was a good time, and it was I didn't make the Dogman into a purely horror character.
But there were a lot of chills in that book.
A lot of chills in the book, but it doesn't read like a bad B movie, you know what I mean? Where, like, I saw that movie, The Beast of Bray Road. Did you ever see that, Donna? It was so awful.
No, I heard it was bad.
Yeah, I saw it, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's not like that. It's not like that. It doesn't go wreak havoc on a bunch of teenagers in the woods or anything like that. So, yeah. But it's fun. It's a fun book, and just kind of an adventure with a, you know, group of people, and, you know, a mystery too. So, yeah, I think it turned out well. I just hope we can get it published here soon. I don't want to go the self-publish route if I can avoid it. So we're trying for agents at this point.
Have you settled upon a name for that book?
Dire Consequences.
Oh, okay. I'll have to make a mental note of that, because when it's out, okay, I'll definitely want to get my hands on a copy.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Like the dire wolf?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's clever. I like that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So, anyway, yeah. It was fun. It was a fun little read.
Well, I'm sure it will be. I'm looking forward to it. I know that the two of you don't get together all that often, but when you do get together, I know that you've been in some areas that were supposedly very heavy with dogman activity. Do either of you get to the point sometimes where you stop and say to yourselves, what in the world am I doing out here?
Absolutely. Right, Jaya?
Yeah, I would say Donna probably does more than I do, because I haven't been out with her very often. Just Wisconsin's far away. Although this weekend I may be saying that, Vic, because we are going up there this weekend. We'll be tromping around in her woods very soon. So I'm hoping for something bizarre to happen. Not scary, but not terrifying, you know? So
right.
That right balance. Creep me out, but don't make me have a heart attack, you know.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good, that's for sure. You've said things that lead me to believe that you probably don't think that dogmen are all that dangerous, but when you hear about encounters where they do things that seem so aggressive and so scary, it can't help but make you start to wonder, at least at sometimes, if you are really leaving yourself out there by going out into the woods unarmed or without being in a group of people. How dangerous exactly do the two of you think dogmen really are?
I think they're a lot more dangerous than I originally believed. And I have to wonder if some of that is just regional behaviors. Like the ones up in Wisconsin, as far as I know, nobody's ever gotten injured by one up there. But yet, when you read reports from people other parts of the country, they seem pretty hostile. So, yeah, I think I'm a little more afraid of the whole concept of the dogman now than I was a few years ago. Yes, that's my 2 cents.
All I know is that I try not to read too much about the dogman before I go out by myself. Because if I did read about the scariness of it all, I probably wouldn't go. So every time I read something really scary, like Missing 411 or a scary part of a dogman story, that one dog man story where the house was surrounded by dog men, surrounded the family. Wasn't that in Maine?
Yeah,
Elmira, Maine?
that's right. That happened
Yeah.
to Shelley Rockwell Martin.
Yes. And when I watched that program and heard that story, well, then I don't want to go out for a while. And on the other hand, I don't go out at night by myself. I go during the daytime, and I'm on private property, unless I'm at Stores Lake, and then I try to stay in the main areas. But when I'm on private property, nothing has ever hurt me, and I know there's been stuff in there. I know there's been, I don't know if it's Bigfoot and Dogman. I don't know what's going on, but I know there's plenty of things in there, but they've never hurt me, and I don't get the feeling that they want to hurt me. I don't get bad vibes in there. So, and that, when we heard the wolf call, it could have chased us. It could have appeared. It seemed more like it was messing with us. When we saw Weird Boy, that's what we call him. When we saw Weird Boy, I got the feeling in my mind that he was saying, I know you and you know me. And it was kind of tried to scare us, tried to just make contact, fooling with us. I don't know.
There's a video, Donna, that is on YouTube that you have made where you're investigating some what appears to be dogman tracks in mud around this reservoir or a pond. You were looking at those prints, moving along slowly, when all of a sudden in the video you stated that you smelled this horrible scent just come over you all of a sudden. Tell us about, give us some background on that. What happened there, and just fill us in on that.
Well, that was the time that we had gone with Travis. We did the interview, and then we went down by the pond, and it's very steep going down to the pond. So whatever ran up that hill and ran fast had to be really strong, because we had to hold on to trees just to get down there without sliding all the way into the pond. But at the time, the pond had receded some, and now it's full, so you can't find tracks around the pond because it goes right up to the grass. But at the time, we hadn't had a lot of rain, and so he took us down there. But it was a couple of years after he'd seen the Dogman, and we still found tracks around the pond, and they had toes, and then there were some that were just completely unknown that I still don't know what they were, and no known animals. We know what other tracks look like and everything, and with the wolf prints and stuff we found, we measured the dog's feet in the area, so we knew they were 2.5 inches, and they're big dogs. 2.5 inches at the most was the diameter of their feet. The wolf prints we were finding were 5.5 inches. So, big wolf, I don't know. But when we were down by the pond, and and then it goes up the hill into the woods, and the smell came up from the woods down to the pond, and it just wafted through, and I commented, I think, and then Jackie and Travis commented on the same thing. So they were a ways ahead of me, and they smelled it too. But then it's weird how the smell just goes through and it's gone. And it wasn't skunk, it was just a foul, it wasn't the pond, because the pond didn't smell before that. It just was a smell that just came through and it was gone. And then a few feet further down, it came through again. What I believe is that something was up there watching us, looking at footprints, looking at their footprints down by the pond. So I don't know whether it was a dogman, because you don't normally associate the smell with the dogman. Normally that's what people mostly think that Bigfoot does. And I think it's just something that they do like a skunk does. They just emit an odor at will, like a skunk. I don't think they just always smell. But that's just my opinion. So that's what was going on in those videos, because I think something was watching us looking at their footprints.
When you saw those wolf prints in the mud, did you notice a left-right-left pattern or a left-left-right-right pattern to them?
Well, I've seen different things. Down by the pond that day, it was hard to tell what was what, because there were so many prints. Seemed like there were Bigfoot prints mixed in with other prints that seemed to be different, longer, much longer, well, not much longer, but much more narrow. And I cast a few of those too. And to me, they appear to be what a dogman, I think, would leave, where it puts down its foot, but also puts down some of that back leg in order to steady itself. But you couldn't really tell, you know, some of them went up to the water, and it was just a left, right, like on two legs. I'm not a four-legged creature. But out by the Bigfoot woods, sometimes you'd see where it looked like it was walking on two legs, and sometimes you'd see where it looked like it was walking on all fours. So I don't know what's going on. But when we came out of the woods, and there were no prints in there in that muddy area when we went in, and when we came out there were two prints in a 12-foot diameter wet area. I don't know how you leave two wolf prints in a 12-foot diameter unless you're walking on two legs. You'd have to leave four prints.
Oh, sure.
Because they don't just jump in there on two legs and then jump out. You know, it had to be something walking on two legs.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it would have to be. If anyone listening is wondering what we're talking about here, when I pose the question about the left, right, left, or left, left, right, and so on, a bipedal creature like a dogman would have that left, right, left pattern. A wolf, for example, has a left, left, right, right pattern when it walks. That's what we're getting at here.
At our area, we saw whole trails, like we filmed and measured and cast. You know, we'd see whole trails of a wolf on four legs. But then we'd also find two prints where it appeared to be on 2 feet on occasion. One occasion was where it looked like it might have been chasing a deer, and it was on 2 legs. And we cast that print. But I think the deer got away because we didn't see any sort of scuffle or anything. So hopefully, I don't know, or maybe it picked it up and made off with it. I don't really know. But it appeared to be something, wolf walking on 2 legs after a deer. And it only appeared ever to be one wolf out there, not a pack. And definitely not coyotes because the prints are way too big. Definitely not the dogs.
I'd say not with prints that big. To hit back on the topic when we were talking about the scent that you smelled, there are a lot of people that think that only Bigfoot emits that foul smell, but there is no shortage of eyewitnesses, dogman eyewitnesses, that reported that same type or similar type of stench when they saw their dogman, a smell that smelled like a mix of urine, sewage, rotting meat, smells like that. So just because you're out in the field and you smell some type of a stench like that, don't necessarily assume that it's a Bigfoot that is in the area. It just might be a dogman.
And see, I didn't know that. I'd never heard that. So
I didn't know that
either. For the information. I was just out there the other day, maybe last week at Stores Lake where Travis had a sighting, and I was walking along the path, and all of a sudden I smelled that stench in one area on the path, and I looked around to see if there was, no, it wasn't skunk, I know that for sure. It wasn't anything like that. It was more like garbage or dead, rotting meat or something, and it was just on one area of the path, and I looked all around looking for something dead, and I checked the woods in a 50-foot square area to see if I could see anything hiding in there, because the smell was so clear that something either just passed through there or was hiding there somewhere and had emitted the odor. So I smelled it again the other day, and I find big structures in those woods too, so I don't know if dogmen build structures. I've never heard of that. Have you?
I've heard people propose that idea. If dogmen do build structures, it would be the type 3s. I don't put it out of the realm of possibility. It's very possible since they do seem to have fingers very similar to a Bigfoot's, so who knows?
Yes. Yeah, and I don't know. But I found plenty of structures in there, so I'm not sure what's going on in those woods. A lot of people say that Bigfoot has his territory and the dogman has his territory. and they don't cross. I don't believe that. You know, I don't know why they wouldn't cross. I mean, of course they're territorial maybe, but from all that I've seen and heard, I think they're in there together. I don't know. Or one is hunting the other, like you were talking about on your first show. The guy thought that the dog man was maybe hunting a juvenile Bigfoot. I'm not sure. I don't know what's going on.
I've had more than a couple people pose that question to me about finding dogman prints right next to Bigfoot prints or dogman prints right on top of Bigfoot prints, and they were asking me about the possibility of them walking together. And exactly what you just said about the whole predation thing, that's my opinion about what's going on. I think that dogman was following a juvenile Sasquatch. It was hunting. That's my opinion, why people see these prints next to each other or one on top of the other. Diane, are you pro-kill or no-kill?
I wouldn't kill anything unless it was trying to kill me first. So I don't want them shooting Dogman or Bigfoot or anything, if at all possible, to not do that. You know, even if it would bring it into quote unquote proof, you know, scientific proof. I just don't think it's, I don't know, live and let live. I'm one of those types.
That's a good approach.
But of course, if he's coming after me and I happen to have a gun, I'm sorry, he's going down. But only as a last resort.
Oh, I don't think anyone could blame you on that. It comes as a surprise to people that aren't associated with Bigfoot research, or I guess to a lesser degree, dogman research, how many researchers there are that are out there that couldn't care less if Bigfoot or dogmen are one day officially proven to exist. Do either of you care if dogmen are proven one day officially to exist?
Not really. I mean, it would be nice, okay? I suppose it would be nice, but I don't know that it might do more harm than good to the species. You know, because if they're proven to exist, then everybody and their brother's going to be going out there trying to hunt them down and so forth, and I don't think that's going to help them. I don't need scientific acceptance to validate my own personal opinion of something, so I guess that's where I stand on it.
How about you, Donna?
I don't know that they're of this realm, so I don't know that anyone could ever prove that they exist, and I don't need anyone to prove that it exists. To me, it's a hobby, and it's fun, and it's scary, and I'm enjoying myself, and I don't care if somebody believes me. I don't care if they're ever proven to exist, because I know what I've been through. I know what I've seen, and there's much more out there than anybody ever realizes or can even imagine. So to me, it doesn't matter. I'd probably be just as happy if nobody ever proved that they were real, especially if it means killing one or capturing one.
To wrap this show up, ladies, Diane first, do you have any closing points you'd like to share with the audience?
I don't have any closing points per se, but I do have a question for you, Vic. Something you said earlier when you talked about the type 3 types of dogman, and you said something about the government calls it that?
That's right. The history on the whole type 3 name falls back to a gentleman that was mentioned on an episode of Bigfoot Hotspot Radio. The guys over on Bigfoot Hotspot Radio referred to a gentleman as Agent Black, I believe. This Agent Black supposedly is an inside connection they have, the way I understand it. He's an inside connection they have who works with the government. And he supposedly told, the way I understand it again, he told Wes and Will, the hosts of the show, certain supposed inside information about Sasquatch and also about dogmen. And Wes and Will say that Agent Black shared with them the fact that the government supposedly refers to the type of dog man that looks like a kind of like a giant baboon of sorts without a tail.
Mm-hmm.
Supposedly Agent Black has said that the government calls that type of dog man type 3s. Now, I have yet to hear any mention of this Agent Black even mentioning canine type dog men. I don't know what kind of vetting Will or Wes did with this gentleman to find out if this gentleman truly is who he claims to be. If he does have any true connections to the government, I don't know that. But that was the genesis of that name, Type 3 Dog Man. The fact,
that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. I wonder about the validity of this guy, because if he was so in the know, how could he not know about canine types? There are quite a few people out there that have seen Type 3 dogmen that are totally opposed to the possibility that there might even be canine type dogmen. But most eyewitnesses that reach out to me are reporting encounters with canine type dogmen instead of Type 3 dogmen. I'd say 65 to 70% or more of the eyewitnesses that I speak with about their dogman encounters, they're telling me about canine type dogmen that have that canine type back leg with the backwards knee look and the more pronounced muzzle. They're not telling me that they saw a more hominid type dogman with legs like we have or like Bigfoot's got. And if that's the case, why isn't that being mentioned by this Agent Black? I don't know. I wasn't on the inside of this. I never have spoken to the gentleman. I don't know what the situation on that is. All I can do is share with you what I believe I've heard them say about what he has said on their shows. That's the story on that.
That's interesting. I've never heard that. I really like that, though, because it is curious. And what's interesting to me is how people could say, I think there is this type, but not this type. You know?
Oh, sure.
you know, like, okay, there is a Bigfoot, but there could no way be a dog man. Well, why not? You know,
oh, sure.
If you could accept one, why can you not at least open your mind to the possibility of the other? So if there can be the baboon type, the Type 3, why not this canine type?
Oh, I agree. It doesn't make sense. Why be so close-minded about one thing when you're amazingly open-minded about another? I've heard some very heated debates on the whole canine-type dogman versus Type 3 dogman subject. It's hard to understand, but there are two separate camps that are viciously opposed, it seems, to believing in the other group's type of dogman even existing. I just can't fathom that.
To me.
No doubt.
That just seems so crazy.
I agree.
Arguing about things that nobody even really knows that much about. Nobody knows. And all the experts that are out there, supposedly, anyway, all arguing together. And it's like, I just think that just about anything's possible. I mean, I know when somebody's talking crazy, but, you know, that's different. But, you know, when you have eyewitnesses that seem to be perfectly normal people and they're telling you they saw something, you need to listen.
Oh, I agree.
Right.
Just like you can check the validity of someone's story by comparing it against what most other people that are talking about that subject report, I do the same thing to check the validity of a lot of the eyewitness encounters that are shared with me. When I have so many people sharing the exact same physical features on the canine type dog man, they're sitting there telling me that they saw. When you've got that many people that don't know each other, that don't communicate with each other, giving me the exact same story, there's something to that. These people are seeing something. I'm convinced that there are canine type dogmen out there, and to brush that off as being nonsense, I just can't understand that.
I think, you know, if you really think about all the strange, just the high strangeness that's going on out there between all these weird cryptids, the fact that these are not just random single events and experiences that people have, but they can actually be classified into certain groups with multiple people that total strangers to one another, and even in different parts of the country or even the world, having similar experiences that all fit into certain categories. You have to really keep an open mind about this stuff, because I wouldn't be surprised if in some way they're all connected. We just don't know what it is. I think there's just a different realm to this reality that we don't even perceive fully, and somehow all this stuff kind of pops through. I don't really know. I can't explain it, but I just think there's so much more to it than just only UFOs or only Bigfoot or only whatever it is, Dogman, what have you. So, my 2 cents, that's all.
You could very easily be right on that. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank both of you so much for your time and being so nice as to come on the show and share all this good information. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you, Vic. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, likewise.
It's been fun.
Been a great time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, please don't be strangers, okay?
Oh, we
Okay.
won't. We'll keep you posted.
That sounds good. I appreciate it. Well, both of you, please have a great night.
Thanks,
You too,
Ted.
Vic. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.